Hello and welcome to World War One TV. Yes, it is me, Paul, not Lucy, because Lucy is on location in the Ypres salient. She is at Tyne Cot as we speak. I'll bring her in right now. Hi, Lucy, and hi, Olivia. How are you today?
Hey! Yeah, really good. It's an absolutely stunning evening. Like, it's so beautiful here. It really is. How you doing, Woody?
I'm good, but I'm still a snot fountain. But apart from that, I'm good. It's just this cold won't go away. But I'll put it on your screen and tell us where we are, Lucy. And please don't forget, I know very little about the Great War, so you have to do all the heavy hitting on this.
Yeah, sure. So I thought, where to start for this weekend. We're doing a few live streams, and I thought, let's start at Tyne Cot because it is the world's biggest Commonwealth War Grave Commission cemetery. And it is a place that is really central to the story of the Ypres salient. And it's just a beautiful place. And the other reason I wanted to start here was because for me, one of the reasons I first got interested and really inspired in the First World War was visiting the War Grave Commission sites and reading and taking my time to just wander around and visit the guys and the girls that are buried in these locations. So, kind of went back to my roots and thought, well, where can I start this thing? And here seemed like the obvious choice.
Right. I'll throw up a map on screen so people can see where we are. So for those who are unfamiliar with the Great First World War sites, we're on the map there. You can see Lucy is currently kind of just between Ypres and Passchendaele there, and that's the map of the Western Front. And I'll throw up another map of exactly where you are. In fact, I'll do that right away. So there's the road between Passchendaele and Ypres, and you're near Zonnebeek, aren't you?
Yeah, so this cemetery is obviously it's very well known because it's the largest, but it's also very important because this was the site that the South Australian Division captured on October in 1917, so towards the end of that famous Passchendaele or Third Battle of Ypres, as I prefer to call it. And it was actually a dressing station at that time. So some of the graves in here are, what I would call original wartime battlefield cemetery graves. And then what happened after the war was all of the smaller cemeteries that were around the area were concentrated in to this magnificent place that you see today. And there's a memorial at the back of the cemetery, and we'll have a wander up there a bit later. And that has the names of many of the missing who died in this area and whose names they couldn't fit on the Menin Gate in Ypres Centre.
Brilliant. And you're going to walk us around the cemetery and tell us small things. So I will hand it back to you and keep talking because I can't fill in with my Normandy stuff. It's irrelevant today. So that's my normal fallback is I mention something to do with Normandy, but I have nothing in my repertoire for this. So keep going.
If you have any questions, just let me know. But I thought I would start here. One of the chaps who is buried here, and this is the grave of Brigadier General James Riddell. And I wanted to start with him just to bust a few myths, really, because one of the big things we often hear is this idea of chateau generals, that these guys were behind the lines, sort of callously ordering their men forward and not really caring. And this guy really goes and proves that blows that entire theory out of the water. He was a very experienced soldier, and he was killed just when he came over to France with his guys. He was killed just under a week after he arrived. He was shot by a sniper during the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915. And in his kind of his citations and everything about when he died, it was his bravery and his kind of fearlessness in the face of battle, where he went to the top. He had all his ranks fully on display to lead his guys into the fight. And so that seemed like a really appropriate place to start, because we've got to remember that this is all about everyone being equal. The whole idea of these cemeteries with these rows and rows of very similar looking headstones, the idea is that in death everybody is the same. Whether you're a private soldier, whether you're a general, you should be remembered equally. And you can see here the grave next to it that we're looking at now. This is one of the unknowns. All we could tell here was that this guy was a captain, so for whatever reason we managed to get that information, or the guys when he was buried managed to get that information. But other than that, that's all you have. And many of the graves here, most of them are like that, so most of them are unidentified, and that's purely a result of the conditions here, and the fighting that went on. The inscription that we're looking at, so known unto God, that was chosen, those words were chosen by Rudyard Kipling, the famous author and poet, and he was the literary advisor to the Imperial War Graves Commission when it was begun during the First World War. And I just suppose I'll just talk a little bit about the personal inscription. So you'll see at the bottom of James Riddell's headstone there, it's got a bit, so killed leading his brigade, but 5 days landed. And it's also got soldier and great gentleman. And those words were chosen by the next of kin. So when people died after the war, when the War Graves Commission was getting in touch with next of kin where possible, they gave people an option to choose a personal inscription. And this was really, this whole idea of kind of having these uniform headforms was quite, headstones even, was quite controversial at the time, because that wasn't what people were used to. People were used to being able to choose their own grave of their loved ones, make it personal. And of course, they were absolutely not used to this idea of having their loved ones buried somewhere where they couldn't visit. So it was quite a controversial thing. The decision was made not to repatriate the men back to the UK, because the fear was that only the people who were wealthy and could do that would do it, and that the cemeteries out here would become essentially paupers' graves. So there was a ban that was introduced, but as a kind of a way to give the family some connection, the idea of putting that personal inscription on was developed. And they're the thing that really got me interested in the First World War. I've written a couple of papers on it because you can learn so much through those words. It's like a little window into the lives of the bereaved and how they dealt with the grief, and also it gives you a lot of information about not just the families but sometimes about the guys that are buried here. So I thought, let's have a walk up. Woody, if you've got any questions, let me know while I wander up to the top, and we'll give you a view of the cross of sacrifice and a bit more of the memorial.
So I'll just jump in for a second, Lucy, because people are asking in the sidebar about whether or not the graves have caskets, and I get the same questions with the World War II graves, and there is no standard rule across the globe, across the conflicts. It depends on what the situations were. Sometimes there were caskets, but rarely there was. I mean, a bit of everything. What would be your answer as a First World War specialist?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really, the idea of uniformity is really what you see, but underneath it, and you'll notice when you visit these places that the layouts of the cemeteries sometimes can be quite confusing. You'll find some are in really neat rows, and others you just get a collection of headstones. And if you think about it, the job that the War Graves Commission had on their hands, at the end of the war, was just vast. Having to not only to locate these guys where possible, because they were scattered around, buried in what best means could be done at the time, but to then kind of pull them together to get everything, the memorials built. It was just a vast job. So in some circumstances, like now, for example, where remains are found, then yes, there are caskets, there's a ceremony and all the rest of it. For many of them, some of them are left in their original places, and it's simply the headstones. The original wooden crosses were taken down and the headstones put up. So it really is variable. But the whole idea and the whole concept here is that the War Graves Commission now have done their best to give these guys what they deserve, in the sense of how we remember them. And all of the cemeteries, to my mind, are beautiful, they're unique. They're unique yet uniform. That's the big thing about it for me. They've got similarities, but there's own special feelings. And a big thing about them is that they're kind of designed to look a bit like an English country garden. So you'll see we've got these glorious roses. I'll give you a view now of the back of the cemetery. And it's just stunning. It really is.
Well, we got the question from JD, Lucy, who is watching. He's not with us as we all had planned at one point. And he's asking about the splurges of colour and the flowers and the roses, because it is the Commonwealth War Graves Commission who do that. You, as a family member, you can lay photos or trinkets or wreaths, things like that. But the flowers, it's the gardeners and their own sort of creativity, really, that decide where they put things. But they use different flowers around the globe, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. So like some of the Canadian cemeteries, you'll see like maple trees, aces, things like that. But they try and keep it in keeping, yes, with with the folks that are buried in certain cemeteries and certain places, and obviously they have a lot to overcome in terms of horticultural difficulties across the world, and that goes for the headstones as well. In certain places the headstones are lying flat because the ground can't cope and there's subsidence and things like that. So each place goes through an awful lot of consideration in terms of the plans and making sure that these places are here, with the idea of them being sort of here in perpetuity. And so the designs shift and change, but all broadly follow the same idea. I'm just going to spin you around now just to show you the view of the Cross of Sacrifice. So this is a feature that anybody who's been to any War Graves Commission cemetery will be really familiar with. And this one in particular is interesting because it's actually located on top of concrete German defensive positions. So there were 5 on this original site. There were each corner and then in the centre here. And apparently it was the King's idea to put the Cross of Sacrifice on top. And you've got this little viewing platform where you can head up and get an amazing view of the cemetery. It's just a really, really beautiful feature, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I want to comment on, I want to bring in is we get this here in Normandy. So I did bring Normandy into it. Is none of the cemeteries were created really with the idea of mass tourism. They were created to memorialize those who fell and for family members to visit. And some cemeteries around the world clearly get a lot more visits than other cemeteries, but that was never in the original mandate of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission or the ABMC for covering the American. It's just that's the way it's gone. But how, as someone who visits them both as a historian and also professionally with tour groups, how do you think the visitor experience works? I mean, my experience of visiting Ypres is the visitor gets a lot out of visiting these places and the information presented is fantastic. What's your point of view?
Yeah, look, you come somewhere like Tyne Cot and they have the facilities here, the big car park, the access roads to it are pretty good. And it's a large space, obviously, so you can bring multiple groups here and it still doesn't ruin the kind of feeling. It's not loads of kids screaming and running around the place. You get that space to kind of process it, which I think you need when you're visiting. But for some of the smaller cemeteries, there are some that get a handful of visitors a year, right off the beat.
We lost Lucy temporarily. Oh, there she's back. There we are. Well, I panicked there for a moment.
We're on 4G, right? So who knows what's going to happen. Yes, I was just saying some cemeteries, don't get many visitors at all because they're just not suited for it. You can't get coaches down there. They're a bit out of the way. Maybe there's only a handful of graves in there. Those are my favourite ones because I always feel like I want to go visit the guys in there because I want to be like, hey, people still care. And, I know, I don't know, I get a bit weirdly sentimental about it. Maybe people will think that's strange, but...
No, definitely. And we're going to have a panel discussion at some point. And both Chris from Vlogging Through History and JD from History Underground are watching right now. And we're hoping they can get involved in this because they are both content creators who do First World War, Second World War, and indeed in their cases, other wars as well. And whether or not there's a kind of difference in visiting those areas and whether you get a different sense. I mean, from my experience, I was up in Ypres 4 or 5 years ago when my eldest stepdaughter was living in Brussels. And I got that point where you try and stop at every cemetery and you drive along and you stop and you drive along and stop. Then after a while you realize we've got to go and do lunch now. And there's that one you drive past without stopping at. And I'm sure thousands of people go through that process of feeling guilty that they've had to miss one because you get to those road junctions where there's 7 off to the left, 5 off to the right, 12 off straight ahead. And it can almost become overwhelming. And people forget just how many there are.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I always feel like when I go to the smaller cemeteries as well, like I always take my time to go around and read every single headstone. And when I come out here with my husband, who, he is interested in stuff, he's ex-RAMC, so of course he's interested in any history, related to those guys. But, he's like, oh God, another cemetery. But I feel like I have to go. I have to see every single guy. I have to read those inscriptions because I think, their father, their mother, their wives chose those words, and what would they think, all these years later, people wandering around and feeling that deep in their heart, that their grief, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
I completely get that.
We've got a couple of questions for you. So Ian Carr is asking you, can you provide details of when the cemetery was constructed and where the fallen there were moved from?
Yes. So if we head over, I'll take you over to this. So this area that we're in at the moment was the original part of the cemetery. So this was the original battlefield cemetery. I believe it was actually during the Third Eep that this was set up, the cemetery, so 1970. And if we go over here, I'll just show you something, because we've got actually a couple of German graves in here. So this dates back to when this place was a dressing station. These guys were wounded, they were obviously treated here, and here they remain. And that's another thing. We've got here these guys, you see here, these are the German buried. And so this area, and you'll notice that the headstones in this area are sort of a bit all over the place. They're a bit higgledy-piggledy compared to the rest of it. And you'll find that when you visit these places, when you see them that are sort of a bit more like this, a bit more disorganised, it's very likely that these were original battlefield cemetery sites. So I hope that kind of answers.
Thank you. And we have another question from I've got to find back Bruce Day. And it's interesting because I'm coming from World War II TV, you're the host of World War I TV. And the question from Bruce Day is, was respect for these First World War sites maintained in World War II? Because obviously the battle moves through some of these areas.
Absolutely, and we'll cover that a bit more tomorrow when we head off to Hill 60, because that was an area that saw, fighting over, quite badly in both wars. And yes, I would say broadly, where possible, right? In war, sometimes things aren't always, the greatest will in the world. It's not always possible to do that. But yes, Hitler is quite widely known for asking people to avoid the big monuments, visited many of them as well. That was a respect, because don't forget, of course, that he was a veteran of the First World War.
Yeah. Paul Reed is correcting us and saying it wasn't a dressing station, it was a regimental aid post. So thank you, Paul Reed.
Thank you, Paul Reed. Of course, you know far more than I do. One day, I hope I get a fraction of your knowledge.
And Paul Reed is something of a legend, and it's good. If you're going to be corrected by someone, it's good to be corrected by someone like Paul Reed. So thank you very much, Paul. So, yeah.
And I'm used to getting corrected, and I always, that's how we learn at the end of the day, because as I always say, what I know is infinitely small compared to what there is to know about the First World War. And I think like I said, Jill, we were chatting before, nobody knows it all, and it's a constant learning thing. It's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to getting involved with World War I TV, to be honest with you.
Well, exactly, because none of us know everything, and it's about a journey that we're on as well as the viewers. I think I've certainly can speak from World War II TV. Is the learning curve I've gone on, and just yesterday talking about railways. I mean, I've learned so much, and it just makes me realise how little I know, and how many people out there know a huge amount. And of course, when we get going with the channel properly, we'll be bringing in some really good experts who will both beat your knowledge and my knowledge, because that's the whole point.
100%.
Great. So anything else you want to take us and show us around there?
Well, I thought if we head back, we'll have a brief look at the memorial at the back of the cemetery. And I think, like, a lot of times when I've brought people here as well, they come in and they're expecting to see their loved one's headstone, and actually, the majority of people remembered here are remembered on the memorial, because they have no known grave. And I just thought I'd just take you to show you that, because it's quite something. And we'll have a look. Unfortunately, the Menin Gate, so we're going to do a little live stream later on from Eep Town Centre. Unfortunately, the Menin Gate is undergoing restorations at the moment. We're not going to be able to take a look at that. I'm sure in future we will get there. But the names that are listed here at Tyne Cot are the names that couldn't fit on the Menin Gate. That's how many people died here and were lost. Their remains were lost forever. Although, of course, they're still found each year when we're doing building works and construction works and things like that. So I always think just kind of having a look down the side, you get just an idea of the vastness of this. I think there's around about 35,000 names along this memorial. So it's quite something. It's quite difficult to, I always kind of think of it in terms of like stadiums or something you can relate to, like Wembley or something like that, because it can be quite tricky sometimes to get your head around it,
I've always found that at the bigger cemeteries, then it's like when you're looking at the Holocaust from the point of view of the millions, it just becomes numbers, and it's very hard to relate to it. For me, a smaller focus allows my brain to comprehend it. I have to start with kind of individual graves, and then gradually allow my brain to accept the volume, because it is still overwhelming when you visit somewhere like Tyne Cot or the Menin Gate or the American Cemetery in Normandy, or I've had photos from people from the Philippines Cemetery in World War II. The number of names is simply staggering. One can't take it on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually really like coming here in the evening. I mean, it's one thing being here when there are groups. It's nice, you know, because it's obviously lovely to see people learning about things, especially kids. You know, that's a wonderful thing. But seeing it in the evening, you know, when you're kind of just alone, yeah, it never fails to kind of move me. Even though I've been here a whole bunch of times, I still find it just incredibly powerful, you know. So perhaps we'll just leave you with a few shots, you know, unless there's any other questions, and catch up a bit later on.
Well, brilliant, and thank you, Olivia, for the superb camera work. Your training with all that rugby content you've been creating is put you in good stead for this. So thanks for that, Liv. Great work.
A big pleasure.
And you're off into Ypres later on, and you'll hopefully join us after the World War II TV stream later on. So as you're walking back around there, Lucy, give us a rough idea of what your plans are for the next 24 hours and the streams you're going to bring us.
Yeah, so tomorrow we're going to be heading up to Hill 60. So that's a really interesting area. We're going to cover a whole bunch of stuff there. I'm hoping to do maybe like a 20-minute, half an hour stream from there, talking about things like gas attacks, Second Ypres, and then also kind of talk a little bit about the Second World War as well, and kind of what we mentioned before about those places, how they can overlap, and you can find yourself, you know, crossing paths with history, as it were. And then we're also going to be going over to Berenwald and looking at the German trench system there, a really interesting place. And again, give a bit of perspective on the German side of things as much as anything. And yeah, that's the plan. But we'll see how it goes. See what strikes your fancy.
No, definitely, and we'll hopefully get the Bluetooth microphone working, and we've got to contend with the weather and my nose running and your hay fever but it's been a great initial live stream there. So thanks to both of you for getting this set up, and for those watching, keep an eye on the channel for when we schedule the next live streams, because it might be not immediate notice, but it might only be an hour's notice. So it depends what we'll do. But Lucy, Olivia, thank you very much, and viewers, any more questions? Zane is asking about restored parts of the trenches in that area that you can visit. That there are some, aren't there?
There are some, and tomorrow we will be showing you some. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, Zane, if you can join us.
I had a rather wise crack comment from David K saying Hills 59 and 61 are insanely jealous of Hill 60. Yeah, that's a nice surreal comment, really. But thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Olivia. Folks, we'll see you all again hopefully later. We'll schedule the next one when we know when it's going to be. And in the meantime, I will be with you in 90 minutes' time for the final of our Railways Week on World War II TV, with a look at the complicity of the German National Railroads in the Holocaust. So kind of a dark show, but an important one. But Lucy, I will join you later on. Folks, thanks very much for watching. I will see you all again later. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.